I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our speaker today. Mairéad currently works for us at the Advocacy Project as our Use the Voice participation lead. Sadly for us, but great for her, she's moving on shortly to do work in video production for Rethink Mental Illness. But she's actually speaking today as a representative of OCD Action. And she's going to talk about OCD from a lived experience perspective, how it works, and talk to us about how to challenge some of the damaging, inaccurate stereotypes that get attached to OCD. So I'm absolutely delighted now to hand over to Mairéad, who I know has got some slides to take us through. Thank you.
Great, thank you everyone for coming today. I know you're all busy and doing very important work, so it's really good to see everybody. I will start sharing my screen and then I think a few more people will be joining. So yeah, and then we'll go view slide show. Yeah, great. And then yeah. So shall I get started, Laura? Yeah. So yeah, I'm Mairéad. I'm here on behalf of OCD Action and behalf of myself, really, because I'm really passionate about this. So I offered to do this before I leave the Advocacy Project, because yeah, it's a really important topic to me, really close to my heart, and just feels very misunderstood. And there's so many aspects to how we can help people with OCD and what it even is and how we can challenge stereotypes. So it feels like a very full topic. So yeah, and then I'm welcoming questions. As Donna said, you can type them throughout and I'll probably get to them at the end of the presentation. So yeah, so this is an image that was made by somebody called Ella, and she's an artist with OCD and has made this as like a representation of her own experiences, which I think is amazing and really visual kind of depiction. So yeah, that's the first one. So the structure of today, we're going to look at who are OCD Action, then what is OCD, what are the related disorders, just some of the related disorders, what are the recommended treatments for these, what are the barriers to accessing treatment for many people, how can we support people with OCD, and then moving forward, what kind of as someone with OCD and as people with OCD, what we're kind of wanting for society to change. So who are OCD Action? OCD Action are the largest national charity for people affected by OCD and related conditions in the UK. They were founded back in 1994. They're quite frontline services. So they offer a helpline and a youth helpline, which is an e-helpline, like email service. The adult one is email or phone, and support groups for a range of experiences, from some of the more like intricate things I'll go into to just being a parent of someone with OCD, or more general groups. But there are a lot of them, and most of them they're all online right now, but there are also in-person groups that I know of, and one of them that I run for LGBTQIA plus people with OCD. And OCD Action ultimately work to raise awareness of the true nature of OCD, so that one day everyone can access the treatment they need when they need it. And I'd say they do more than just raise awareness. They really work on behalf of people with OCD to make their lives better in more ways than one. And I've been fortunate enough to receive lots of information and support from OCD Action when I was 19, and when I first realized I had OCD, having struggled with it since I was about 13 from what I can remember, but probably before. And they were the first place that I reached out to when I realized finally what it was that I'd been struggling with and what was making me feel like a bad person. And they were just amazing. Like, they answered all my questions, and then I just felt like, God, if I didn't know what this was and I was the one struggling with it, loads of people are in my position. I really want to help and get that message out there. So that's when I started volunteering with them about 1920 as a media volunteer. Then I moved into being a helpline volunteer a few years later, and I received training, some of which I suppose has informed what I know now, or a lot of it actually, more specialist stuff. And then I stopped doing that about a few years ago to then be on the youth co-production panel, where it's kind of ideas based and future thinking. So yes, I've worked or volunteered for them in many capacities, and they've all been brilliant opportunities for me to learn, train, meet people with my struggle and condition, and just feel like I'm giving back, since I'm learning along the way. So what is OCD? Obsessions are unwanted, intrusive thoughts, images, or sensations that cause anxiety. Compulsions. Sorry, I live on a very busy road, so that's that. Compulsions are physical or mental behaviours that are carried out in order to reduce anxiety, quite in a simple way. Disorder. This becomes a disorder when it has a severe impact on someone's quality of life. But in a more visual way again, we here have the OCD cycle, and OCD approximately affects around 1.6% of the population worldwide, but this is likely to be a lot more, because many people with OCD don't know they have it, as was my experience for quite a few years, or they're quite fearful of speaking out about what they're struggling with, even if they know it's not quite healthy, or that they're not well. The disorder works as a cycle, as you can see here. So something triggers an intrusive thought, sensation, idea, image, impulse, urge, or memory, and we kind of refer to those all as intrusive thoughts. They quickly become obsessions because we attach meaning to them as people with OCD. So I guess it's important to note that everyone in the world has this aspect, which could be something like, what if I push that person in front of a train when you're standing on a platform? It might be like a fleeting, intrusive kind of weird thought, but people without OCD can usually let them go and carry on with their day, whereas those of us with OCD attach meaning to it. Without trying, we attach meaning to the thought. We feel significant distress and unease or disgust or shame, guilt, lots of things, and from that we feel like we need to do a compulsion in order to relieve this distress and feel like we're taking responsibility for this intrusive thought. That can be an overt behavior, visible thing, which are the kind of more the things we've seen more in the media, like washing hands, tapping, switching lights on and off. But more often than not, it's actually not one of those, which they are somewhat common, but there's even more common compulsions like rumination, thinking over and over a thought until you feel like you've been eased your kind of anxiety, or avoiding things altogether that can trigger these intrusive thoughts, or that remind you of them, or that maybe appeared in them. Asking other people for reassurance, researching, am I a bad person, or more specific to your intrusive thought theme. I'll go on to some more of them, both examples of intrusive thoughts and compulsions later, but yeah, ultimately they kind of trigger some kind of short-term relief quite a lot of the time for some people, not always, but with that becomes negative reinforcement to the brain that the obsession and the intrusive thought did warrant these compulsions and did need to be responded to, and that starts to create neural pathways in the brain that's what's needed in order to continue with your day and your life. And so the cycle kind of becomes more and more robust, and that's kind of what creates disorder rather than just having fleeting intrusive thoughts. OCD is characterized by this kind of taking up more than an hour a day, but ultimately this cycle. Yeah, I think I've covered that. OCD is listed as the fifth most disabling mental health condition worldwide, so it's up there in the top most disabling conditions of all kind, which is quite a big statement, I'd say, and quite a big thing considering most people trivialize it or view it as something not that bad. So yeah, the next slide OCD, yeah, this is another kind of image from a different, for someone who's actually a therapist and an artist. And yeah, that's off Instagram somewhere where these kind of things are sometimes shared, infographic type things. So intrusive thoughts and images tend to coalesce around specific themes that usually cause well, yeah, ego dystonic means opposite to someone's values. So most of the time they're sometimes they can be things that aren't as kind of taboo, but often they feel very opposite to somebody's values. So they can be around, most commonly, safety and harm thoughts, worrying about causing harm to the self or others, worries about sexual orientation, worries about relationship decisions, which sometimes is called relationship OCD, fear of doing something illegal, fear of being a paedophile, over concern for honesty or religious purity, or existential fears. So yeah, as I said before, we all experience some intrusive thoughts, but they're, for people with OCD, they're worse, more repetitive, and cause more anxiety, which is where the compulsions come in. But they're not a reflection of the person's character or values. Most of the time, they're quite the opposite, and the person has. So a therapist once said in a documentary I was helping with, it will be the loving parent that gets intrusive thoughts about their child or causing harm to the child. It's not a reflection of the person's character. So that's really important to note when you're opening up about OCD and talking more about these things. So yeah, here there's kind of some, I think I mentioned most of these, but basically, yeah, it can really get down to kind of praying in the wrong way. That can become an obsession, and then you can imagine that the compulsions that come with that are quite can be quite distressing, as they can all be. And some of them are quite hard to differentiate between, like, what is within my normal or my healthy way of living and what I want to do for myself and my life, and what becomes compulsion and disorder and is actually harming me and continuing this disorder. So physical compulsions, as we went in, can be checking, cleaning, hoarding, tapping, switching on and off, or arranging. Mental or invisible compulsions, which are more basically what I've experienced, and therefore why maybe I didn't realize, and why many people don't realize they have OCD, since the media depictions tend to focus on the physical ones, can be rumination, trying to rationalize or disprove. Thinking over and over basically is rumination. Researching, which now with obviously smartphones is quite easy to do and get stuck on. Checking over thoughts or memories, thinking back, oh, did I do this? Did I do that? Is my thought because I did this? Like, is this thought I'm getting, can it be confirmed that it's actually wrong and I'm actually a bad person because of that thing I did? Kind of thinking over and over things from when you're a child or teenager or anything like that. Asking for reassurance from others, either overtly asking, am I bad? Or maybe just saying statements to see how other people respond. Avoiding situations or people that bring on the intrusive thoughts, or neutralizing, trying to think over a good thought to cancel out the bad, or counting. I think I mentioned up there's many different forms of that. So yeah, what OCD is not, after all of that, it's obviously not an adjective. You can't be a little bit OCD. And I know that for most people, probably every time I've heard that being used in as an adjective, it's not coming from a bad place. It's coming from a place of not understanding what it is. Or actually sometimes people are experiencing some OCD traits or symptoms, and maybe they're even trying to get across that they are, they're not trying to make a joke about it. So I often try and take the approach of like, oh, are you, like, because that's something I struggle with and it's really difficult disorder. And then if they're not and they're making fun of it, they probably realize that that's not okay. And if they actually are trying to get something across or are worrying about whether they are struggling with it, they can open up about that if they want, or go and look more into it. But it is if you're not, then it is best not to do that, because it ultimately keeps on this narrative that it's something trivial, it's the tapping things just for fun or a personality quirk, that kind of keeps people from realizing what it is and suffering in silence for longer, really. It's not a personality quirk. People with OCD do not enjoy their intrusive thoughts or performing compulsions. it's not about being clean and tidy. Many people with OCD do not experience intrusive thoughts related to contamination, and many of them who do, they're still not enjoying the cleaning and tidiness. If someone's obsessive about being clean and tidy, but doesn't get intrusive thoughts and doesn't find the whole thing distressing, it can be many things, perfectionism, but there's also something called obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is quite separate, and I don't know as much about it, but it can be an enjoyable thing, but it's not to do with intrusive thoughts and compulsions. It's to do with it's a personality disorder, so it's quite separate. So I think they've also been quite conflated, and that's part of the problem. People with OCD can be messy just like anybody else, and OCD is not always visible. In fact, people often go to great lengths to hide their OCD. Additionally, many compulsions are invisible. You can't tell somebody has OCD just by looking at them. Body dysmorphic disorder. So I realize there's a lot of text here, but it's because it's quite intricate and I want to do it justice. And yeah, so the most common worries are usually with body dysmorphic disorder around facial features, for example, skin, hair, nose, eyes, chin, and teeth. However, any part of the body can become a focus of concern, including genitals. So body dysmorphic disorder, the reason I'm talking about it is because it's quite closely related to obsessive compulsive disorder in the same kind of family of conditions, and works in a quite similar way and is treated with similar treatment. So yeah, some people with BDD do not worry about specific features, but instead they say they feel generally ugly. Others say that they do mind their individual features, but they do not fit together. They don't mind the individual features, but they don't fit together or look symmetrical. Some young people worry that they look too feminine or masculine, or that they don't look right compared to their family or others. So it can be around a lot of areas. But people with BDD typically carry out a range of repetitive behaviours to try to cope with their appearance concerns. For example, trying to camouflage their perceived flaw by covering it with clothing, excessive amounts of makeup, or using other parts of their body. They can also spend huge amounts of time examining their appearance in mirrors and other reflective surfaces, or may avoid looking in mirrors. They find it too distressing altogether. It's very common for people with BDD to also spend a lot of time carrying about grooming routines, such as applying makeup and cosmetic products. This is not about vanity, and that's really important to know, because I struggled with this as a teenager and into early adulthood. And yeah, obviously people think you're being vain, and people call it that, and maybe you feel guilty for that, and it's not about vanity. It's a very deep and distressing feeling. It's about trying to correct their perceived defects in an attempt to look normal or passable, or kind of not for myself, but other people describe it as like not distressing other people because they feel like a monster. So yeah, it's interesting to think about all of these things in a bit of a different way than what we might first think. Lots of people compare their appearance to others. This is often done online, or even to family members. Seeking reassurance, as with OCD, is common too. Some people with BDD engage in behaviours that can be harmful when they're trying to improve their appearance. For example, picking spots or skin, which actually then causes scars and further anxiety, which leads us on quite well to the next related condition or conditions: body-focused repetitive behaviours. I think these make up about 5% of people in the population suffer with these. So it's quite a very, very common in terms of mental health conditions. One, BFRBs for short. They're self-grooming behaviours used as anxiety relief, which become quite automatic. The feeling of relief reinforces in the brain from either the skin picking, so the most common is skin picking and hair pulling. Compulsive skin picking also can be called dermatillomania, and compulsive hair pulling, trichotillomania. And their self-grooming behaviours, yeah, they come quite automatic. People have described it as the feeling of relief from picking skin or pulling hair reinforces in the brain that they are a positive and successful way of reacting to anxiety, even though on a conscious level the person is very distressed by the uncontrollable behaviour and the damage to their skin and body that comes with it. They might not be distressed in the time. Some people refer to it as becoming almost like a trance. They don't really realise they're doing it, but usually are distressed by the the impact of it. Yeah. So we're going on to treatment now. I'm aware that I've been going through it quite quickly and there's a lot been covered, but I think I'll continue and then do questions at the end. So yeah, treatment. So the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, they're part of the Department of Health, and they publish guidelines on how to treat or provide care to different people and in different situations based on evidence and research. The NICE guidelines only recommend CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, with ERP, exposure and response prevention, for OCD. And these are the main treatment types for BFRBs and BDD2. And also or anti-obsessional medication, which are SSRIs, mostly for OCD, and serotonin selective reuptake inhibitors, something like that, but SSRIs for short. And so yeah, CBT with ERP and or medication are the most reliable and evidence-based treatments for OCD and BDD. ERP is actually the most important element of the therapy, because while CBT helps the person understand OCD and take part in their treatment, exposure and response prevention actually kind of cuts into that cycle we spoke about before, where by putting someone in a situation that kind of fires off the obsessions and anxiety, but helping them as a OCD therapist to sit with the anxiety instead of doing the compulsion, the response, you're cutting out that cycle that keeps continuing otherwise. And that's obviously done in a very graded and gradual way. You don't go to your first session and they make you touch a load of dirt or something like that. It's very much gradual and done with your consent with the therapist, and you work together to create this trusted relationship where that can happen. That is basically the most effective treatment for OCD. People are often offered things that are definitely more like psychoanalysis, psychodynamic kind of talking therapy, but actually for many people with OCD, talking about the past and diving into things can actually be part of continuing OCD, and can actually be a compulsion that I've myself have done in a therapist's room, like talking about things. They're talking about them with me because they're not aware I have OCD, and we're kind of just doing compulsions together, which is really unhelpful. So I'm really passionate about people being aware of the right kind of treatment. And there's another thing to make sure that it's the thing that the GP offers and sends the person for. But we'll get on to that. Well, we'll get on to that now. Barriers to accessing treatment. So there's 11 to 17 years between, on average, that's a big variety as well, but a long time between the onset of symptoms, the symptoms starting, and people asking for help, and a long more time before people actually receive that help. But that's varied, so I don't want to use a statistic, but you can imagine that's a difficult thing, especially in the current climate. What could be causing this delay? Well, lack of public awareness and knowledge about OCD and treatment options is a big one. If you don't know what it is, how are you going to ask for help about it? And it's as with the rest of society, there's still a lot of misunderstanding and trivialization within the medical sphere. Obviously, this is not to say for everyone. I've met even GPs, who are quite general practitioners who really understand it because they know someone with it, or they have looked in. Like there are exceptions to this rule, but this is kind of the wider issue at hand. So yeah, lack of public awareness and medical awareness at the kind of first level with GPs. Trivialization of OCD. There's been lots of cases of GPs misdiagnosing OCD and not sending people for the appropriate treatment. And there's a particularly bad case was in the UK, but I didn't want to bring that up because I think it could stop people even wanting to get help, but or even going to seek help when it's actually, that was a bit of a one-off, this particular case. But yeah, general kind of misdiagnosing and sending for the wrong treatment, an underfunded NHS, obviously long wait times, internal stigma and shame and fear that no one can help, or that you'll end up in you know, without much say, being worried that you'll get your autonomy taken from you if you open up about these things. And then in addition to the barriers faced by many service users, those from ethnic minority backgrounds appear to be dealing with issues including discrimination from within the medical system, stigma within communities, and a general lack of trust in the health system. This is a direct quote from this paper. But ultimately, I guess, like, when you're dealing with other forms of discrimination, opening up about something that's quite taboo, and can be even more taboo in certain communities, some of these intrusive thoughts, obviously is more difficult, and that's why we need more research and support for those from ethnic minority backgrounds with OCD. And yeah, how to support someone with OCD. Well, actively listening and not judging when they open up about what could be quite taboo, intrusive thoughts, or even things that are not, seem quite trivial to you, not trying to stay quite non-judgmental, educating yourself and others on what OCD really is, as you've done by coming today, but also maybe passing that on to others, reading up more on it, not trivializing the condition or using OCD as an adjective, supporting the person to access evidence-based treatment, which can be a long journey, supporting them to advocate for their rights in work. There's workplace adjustments. There's more information about all that on the OCD Action website. Education system, so university or school, they can have reasonable adjustments as well. More information can be found. Yep. Letting them know that they can call the OCD Action helpline. I'd say that's the first place I went. It's the first place lots of people go, and it's a great place to go. Or you yourself could call them if you know somebody and want to help them better, or if yourself are struggling. Moving forward, this is final slide. What do we need as people with OCD? So we want better understanding of what OCD really is across society, including amongst medical professionals. We want to eradicate the trivialization of OCD, no one or fewer people thinking it's a quirk or adjective. Better media representations, which could be some of the root of the problem and could actually help address it. There's a good television program, the best I've seen on OCD, called Pure on Channel 4, so it's on 4OD online, which is about a young woman with OCD, which, when it's all invisible like mine and you can't see it, it's often nicknamed pure OCD. But yes, that's quite a good television show if you're looking for something. Funding for more therapists to be trained in CBT with ERP, because there aren't enough. And then more services kind of linked to that, providing this. So then linked to that, quicker access to treatment, and funding towards research on OCD, especially how to better support marginalized groups with OCD, the links between OCD and poverty and other struggles. So yeah, that's actually it from me. And yeah, thank you for listening and for staying on. And
Right, thank you. Thank you, thank you very much, Mairéad. That was really, really informative, and also thank you for sharing your own experiences as well with people. I can't see anything in the chat other than something from Cezin saying thank you. That was great. So maybe if anyone's got any questions, if they can indicate, and then Mairéad can take them. Oh, Jonathan's got his hand raised.
Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Mairéad. Thank you so much. That was really, really, really interesting. I wonder what thoughts you have, because I know you talk about the sort of barriers to support and how people can, both the internal and the external barriers, I guess. But is there a barrier? Is there a sort of diagnostic barrier? Do people find it difficult to access support until they've got a sort of formal diagnosis? Is that an issue that you come across at all?
Well, luckily, actually, it's not, because you don't need an OCD diagnosis to get treatment, to get CBT with ERP on the NHS.
Okay.
So it's not, yeah, so getting a diagnosis, I mean, some people, because they've got comorbid conditions, other things going on, or sometimes really want a diagnosis, like an official one, or maybe need it for certain adjustments, will go down that route and need to see a psychiatrist, but which obviously then takes longer. But if it's just getting the help, the CBT with ERP, the GP can refer you for that. And actually you can refer yourself with IAPT. But so it's not, I think the main thing at that initial roadblock would be that GP send people for like too lower level CBT and like low intensity, which most of the time for someone with OCD is not going to work, or isn't going to work as well, and then they're going to probably lose faith in CBT, which a lot of people do. They think, oh, it didn't work for me the first time, but maybe they were sent for too low a level, or with a therapist that just doesn't understand OCD because they haven't specialized in it, or they haven't treated it enough, and they don't know what exposure and response prevention is. So there's quite a few barriers. But I think I actually think that even though clearly there aren't enough isn't enough of this service, I think that I always tell people in the group that I facilitate to like advocate for themselves in that room, or if they could take someone with them who's really like, this is what I've got, I know this is the evidence-based treatment that works, I really want you to make sure that when you send me to iCope or wherever I'm going, that I'm seeing someone who understands that and understands OCD and has treated it before. And because I've been to multiple therapists, and most people have who get there and the therapist doesn't know what it really is. And like, I always ask them first to explain it, what it is. And, well, they haven't treated someone with it before. And it's really disheartening, because then you feel like even more of a lost cause, because and you're probably not even going to open up about the thoughts, which might even be quite wise if they don't understand what it is and they're going to go into your childhood. Do you know what I mean? It's not very helpful. So I think yeah, there's a thing that I didn't mention called a GP card that OCD Action's website have, where if you're going on your own and you're too afraid to kind of open up about some of this stuff, it has what OCD is and what you need in terms of treatment. So yeah, I think that can be helpful if you're not wanting to open up in the room. And actually, another thing I didn't mention is when I'm encouraging people to go to the GP, I say you don't need to tell the general practitioner about your most taboo intrusive thoughts. They might want to know, because often they do, and I don't know, I think it's not just curiosity. I think it's like just to make sure that you have got OCD, but you can just say, I suffer with lots of different intrusive thoughts, I do lots of different compulsions, which you might be more happy to open up about, like this and this, but you don't need to go into all of the dark thoughts, because at that point they're still a general practitioner, they might not have specialist understanding of OCD, and although they shouldn't obviously stigmatize you, it could come off that way, I suppose. So it's still a far way to go. And I basically tell people, know that it's your right. You don't need to go off on that to get the help that you need. Yeah, thank you. Maureen, good to see you.
Hi, Mairéad. I miss you at my meetings.
Yeah.
You're still always welcome to attend. I wanted to ask, I'm trying to think of how to formulate this question. I think it was a really fascinating presentation, so thank you. And I was interested because you mentioned about people tend to have a diagnosis or their disorder starts to appear between the ages of 11 and 17.
No, that was the time it usually takes. Sorry, that might not have been clear. Between the amount of years between the onset of symptoms and coming out or speaking out about it. I think the age people get it can be a wide range, but I think 19 is the most common kind of that age of realizing, and about 13 of getting the intrusive thoughts. But actually it can actually come on at any time. Yeah.
Okay, because thank you. I was thinking it must be quite difficult also to diagnose anything at that age, especially in terms of adolescence, and especially with the body dysmorphia, and also the influence of social media, where you have to look a certain way. So that was my thought. If there was any sort of research done in terms of the impact of social media, and also resulting in the right diagnosis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, there is research, and I think campaigns about social media and its effect on body dysmorphic disorder, I think there's a lot to be found out there on that, but I think the BDD Foundation, their website, which is kind of the equivalent as OCD Action, but for more specific for body dysmorphic disorder, they have some really good, that would be where I'd look for the research and campaigns and stuff on that, and social media, and people have spoken about, young people that I know, about the effect that they think that that's caused on their experience, and sometimes what's triggered it, or definitely worsened it, although it's been around for a long time, but definitely, yeah, made it, I think the amount of people suffering go up. And yeah, I think that is probably why as a child, people and teenager and adolescent, I think that a lot of the time it would be more about getting them to the right, they're struggling, they've opened up about struggling, it would probably be more about getting them into trying to, you know, into CAMS and for some support, rather than putting you know, some young people get diagnosis, some people don't, and just get the support they need at the time, and then continue without that. But I think the more important thing than diagnosis is really treatment and support. CBT and ERP is not going to do any harm, so having them go for that treatment and get it is a good thing if they're struggling in some capacity and suffering, even if it's not that they're going to struggle with this thing for life, or they might not be the worst person who's ever had it. It might be something quite short term for them, but there's no harm in them trying to get the help if they're opening up about struggling about some of these things. And usually someone who has ever treated OCD with BDD will look out for that cycle kind of fears and quite deep level of distress and disgust and guilt and shame and all this sort of thing, whether that's with the intrusive thoughts or the appearance, and then some form of response to that of repetitive behaviours to respond to their anxiety and to their either perceived flaw or perceived defect, either as a person or as an appearance, and then continue in, and they'll be able to spot that and differentiate it from other things. Yeah. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Have we got any other questions at this stage? Oh yeah, I've got Maxine now. Oh no, or is that applauding? And Laura's got her hand up as well.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It was really fascinating to learn about. Kind of have a question about my own daughter who's 9, and I know for young children it's obviously must be really common to want kind of strict boundaries and to kind of repeat certain kind of things because that's the way they kind of gain confidence and stuff. But she definitely has tendencies to really kind of what I would see as kind of fixate on something and repeat it. And it's just really interesting hearing your talk, because I'm sort of thinking, is there a way of, do you just keep an eye on it? And if you start to identify some of the kind of more serious things that you talked about, then perhaps you would try and look into that a bit more. I mean, it's just kind of, I suppose she's so young, I'm wondering at what age you might start to look for signs of something that could end up being OCD. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's such a good question actually. Like, and when you go to like anything on OCD, like when I went to the conference this year, OCD Actions conference, like I spoke on my experiences, and there was a lot on childhood and being a child with OCD and differences between OCD and autism, and lots of different interesting things, and lots of specialists looking into exactly that, lots of stuff on the website about that, and the helpline are really good on it too. But I think from like hearing about other people's experiences, it would be like just keeping the conversation open. Obviously you never know what's going on inside, even if you can see things externally. So I think keeping conversations open, like I know that one day when I hope to have children, I'm going to be like, you know, there's no such thing as like a bad thought. You're not, if you think things that you're worrying about, don't worry. Like it's all thoughts are not who we are, and we're not our thoughts, and this kind of thing, so that if they do start struggling with more that side of things, they can open up about it, and it's not weird for them. They don't feel too ashamed like I did and most people do, but hopefully don't need to moving forward as a society. We don't need that. But yeah, I think that keeping an eye and just being just being compassionate as you are, and even aware of these things and what could be going on, but also that, like you say, that these things, I'm not a childhood specialist, but I think that like a lot of repetitive behaviors and these types of things are normal in different parts of it, and whether, I suppose, if it's causing them distress and to what extent. Like I think I was quite distressed a lot as a child, and like would probably go on and on about things, or like, you know, and would be looked at like, I think everyone, all the adults around me just thought I was like, I don't know, like naughty, I guess, or like attention. I don't really know, but I know that for me there was probably, even though I don't remember before 13, like intrusive thoughts, I imagine that those things, now looking at what's happened since then, were like forms of trying to ease my own anxiety. So like for me, not listening to the adult around me about when they told me to stop doing something was probably less scary, like punishment, than like my own anxiety around stopping doing the thing. So I think, yeah, the levels of distress around it and sadness or yeah, around it. Whereas if they seem to just be okay, but they're just going along with doing their repetitive, maybe it's a slower thing before any kind of external.
That's really helpful, I think. And also the thing they're talking about, maybe not always talking about it. That's my natural desire, is to talk to her about it, but then she can get quite fixed on the talking about it, if that makes sense. And so I think it's just being better educated, but this has really helped me, this talk, just to kind of think about it a bit more. So thank you.
Good. Oh, thank you. I'm glad. Anyone else? Maureen.
Maureen's got her hand up, yeah.
Mine's just a straightforward question. You talked about the Channel 4 online documentary. You said it was called, is it Pure OCD?
It's actually just called Pure, and it's a television show, like a drama about this experience, but it's written by someone with OCD about kind of her experiences, but in a quite I'd say quite an upbeat drama format, which maybe makes it easier than a documentary in some ways to watch for people. And if you know anyone that you think could be struggling with these types of thoughts, it really visualizes them in quite a good way, and it, as in, it's not triggering, it's a very fun television show, actually, funnily enough, with that theme. So I think it's a great one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have a look for it.
Great, thank you.
Right, has anyone else got any questions? It's your last chance, really. We've still got another 10 minutes or so. Maxine.
Hello, everybody. I'm just curious to know, I mean, obviously the condition engages all sorts of emotional responses, etc. But is there research that supports that perhaps it's a neurological condition development?
I think yeah, I think, do you mean in terms of like neurodivergent? Like, does it come under that?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, as we know, like with autism, that's very specific on a wide range of how it affects and etc. And I just wondered if this condition is kind of akin to that, in that there's some kind of neurological development issue.
I don't know what, to be fair, I don't think OCD Action talk about it in as being under the they just refer it to as like a mental health condition, a mental illness. But I think that I've seen stuff, but maybe less kind of less well evidenced, but just kind of that it like, but also, yeah, that it's under the kind of neurodivergent umbrella, and that basically it impacts, I think, the way I see everything, not just, so even when I'm not in distress, like right now I'm doing quite well and I'm not following the cycle and I'm not in distress, I think how I see the rest of the things, how I think, and because I also have ADHD, but I do think that impacts it as well. And I think it's kind of wider than this mental illness and suffering. So I think in that way I would personally feel like it's kind of under this umbrella. But in terms of actual research and what OCD Action would say, it was like a mental illness, mental health condition. They wouldn't want to merge it too much with other things, just because even though there are a lot of similarities, often they get misdiagnosed. So someone with child with autism might get OCD, or OCD with autism, I think more commonly, and often they can be together but not always. So it's that's maybe why they kind of try and differentiate them. Thank you for your question. And now
all are indicating now.
Yes, hello Mairéad, thanks for the presentation. Just wondering, in relation to OCD, I realised the terminology of a little bit OCD trivialises the condition, but is there a spectrum of OCD experience? I mean, I know that I've heard of people who've been involved in crashes who had to reach that bridge at that time every morning on their way to work, that it can be, but then there are other people who can say that is illogical. It's maybe what I want to do, but I won't do it because it's a very unsafe thing to do. You know, so the extremes within the condition, is that recognised?
Yeah, and actually that made me think of something else, which anyone working, I suppose, in like mental health will have heard of, like insight. So people with OCD actually tend to have a really high level of like insight. They know that what they're doing is illogical, and they know that it's not. I really should mention that in that cycle. That should be in the image, but tell the artist. But basically the insight, so you know that it's not right, and to a large extent, on some level, you know it's not true. Like, you know you're not a paedophile, you know you're not this, you know you're not that. But because the level of uncertainty and just what if, like the what ifs that exist in life, because they really feel so unlivable and overwhelming for people with OCD, they just have to do the compulsions to make sure. So is the goal to get rid of that, but that's what it starts off as. So I guess when that person felt like the need to drive to that place, it probably felt like life or death. I mean, turns out obviously it can be really dangerous, and it was, but I think it feels like life and death, and most of the time it's obviously not. And then the compulsions, yeah, I suppose can be quite extreme and very, yeah, illogical. And I think there is a spectrum, I suppose, in terms of it's, I think, only called a disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. I suppose within OCD, that acronym is disorder, and I think the disorder exists when it takes up enough of your time and is distressing enough that it's disorder. Other than that, it might just be that you're quite a like there could be other words that would be used, like a perfectionist, or there are, I feel like, a lot of words that you could use when you meant OCD that wouldn't signify like disorder, like you don't need to say if you're having different moods and mood swings that you've got, that you're a bit bipolar. It'd be better just to say I'm experiencing mood swings and be more accurate. So I think that's the difference. But yeah, within OCD, there's usually a lot of insight when it's just OCD, and depending on what else you're struggling with. But as you go along the condition and as you get treatment, hopefully that level of insight will probably even grow, and hopefully the not doing the compulsion, like the person you knew who didn't do the thing, would be coming along the way, and that would be the goal, was to not do the compulsion. But I guess there's a level of extremity, but I guess it's also important that like everyone with the actual disorder is struggling and suffering, even if their symptoms or compulsions or thoughts don't seem as difficult or do seem really difficult, and that the level of suffering might internally be the same.
Thanks, Mairéad.
Thank you all. I think Maureen had one more, and I think, and then no, oh, was that from before? From before. Yeah, any last ones before we go?
Right, did you have any last thoughts you wanted to share with us, Mairéad, before we wind up the session?
Do I have any? Let me think. No, I don't think so. I think it was helpful to have questions and answers, because that brought up the thing about insight and stuff, which I do think is really important. to mention. Yeah, it's because, like, I suppose it could be quite different from other mental illnesses in that way. Like, even when people are in a, you know, in a hospital or with other people with other conditions, it's like, I think with OCD, it's quite, people describe it who have it as pretty frustrating, because you know what you're doing is unhealthy, and most people know it's unhelpful for them, but they feel like they can't not do it because it could literally, in your mind, kill your family, or mean that you're a disgusting person, or mean that you could cause harm. So it's like knowing that it's mad and doing it anyway, like it's really frustrating when you're stuck in it. It feels like you just can't get on with your day unless you do it. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more. I'm working on a lot of projects around it, like on a video computer game that's about a girl with OCD trying to escape this room, and there's lots of different symbols for her OCD, like a cactus, and there's lots of different things. So it's quite a fun game, but it's also got these documentary clips and inserts that have me and other people with condition talking about it, and experts and professionals from across the field. So that's going to be quite cool, and that's going to come out in April. So it might be that I can share that or something. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff happening. I'm posting on Rethink Mental Illness a little bit about it, alongside all of the other severe mental illnesses, for their social media. So yeah, just there's a long road ahead, but a lot of people are trying to do a lot of awareness. So yeah, and beyond awareness, we need proper change, obviously, and treatment available.
Right, well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mairéad. That's been a really insightful session for people, and we've had over 40 people on the call all during the session. So thank you all of you for giving up your time as well, because I know that everybody's time poor at the moment. So it's great that people are giving up their time, and I think everyone will have gone away feeling a lot more informed about OCD and about what they can do, either to help themselves or to help the people around them. And I can see thank yous and comments coming up in the chat now. So thanks again to everybody. Laura from the Advocacy Project will share any relevant materials, I think including the slides, with everybody who's attended, and there will be stuff on our website as well. So thanks very much to everybody. And don't forget, if you want to know more, you can also look at the OCD Action website, which is very, very informative. So thank you very much, particularly to Mairéad for the information, but thanks to everybody else as well for their time, for their questions. So it just remains me to wish everybody a good rest of your day. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.